And you're very welcome back. 53106, get in touch. We were at Off the Ball as well. Lots of people agreeing with you, Michael McCarthy. I would say in the main, people are agreeing with you, and they want more robust discussion on their televisions.
Don't worry, Joe. I can see those messages too. Plenty of people call me Egypt as well.
No.
They've a right to their opinion.
No, there's plenty like Arthur as well who just want boring television. Can we not just be quiet, everyone, and calm down?
I know, yeah. I don't even like. I'm not. The funny part about it is like, I'm the same general thing that it doesn't dominate the way it used to. All coverage right across the board doesn't dominate the way it used to, but I just think that's a reflection of, in certain extent, just the broadening out of what's available, and also then, well, you know, like in general, that's just the way it goes.
I'm not reopening this conversation, sorry.
Fine.
So let's move on then. One of the other discussion points this week obviously has been at the rugby. Brandon Driscoll's been on the show earlier on, and I posed a question to him. Would you rather get to a semi-final, lose the semi-final, presumably semi-final stage in the World Cup, or would you rather win a series in New Zealand? And ultimately he said win a series in New Zealand. Now if it's just get to a semi-final and let's see what happens, then I want to take my chances there and fire on through. So that's kind of the way he manoeuvred his way through that one. Matt Williams was on as well, and this is part of this whole theme as to like how important is a series in New Zealand a year out from a World Cup in terms of achievement, and to what extent should it be cherished or dismissed, and is everything just preparation for a World Cup? So Matt was on with us on Monday, and we were talking about selection for the third test, the final test, and he made there's a real rationale to what he was saying, and he was suggesting Ireland and Andy Farrell should play in effect a second string or else a very experimental side against New Zealand in this deciding test. His logic being you can't lose. If you win the test, then not only have our first team beaten you, our experimental second string side have beaten you. We really have your number. We'll see you in 15 months' time, and we have, you're in our back pocket. Or if we lose, well then you only beat our second string side. Our best team beats you. We know how to beat you. You'll remember that as we fly home. So in effect, though, it was like distinct chance of sacrificing winning series in New Zealand.
Okay, shall I start, Arthur?
Well, look, I'm not from any sort of rugby background.
You're from Limerick?
No, I'm from Sligo. And like
with Limerick connections,
but like South Limerick, like it's not, you know. But like I'm not.
It's all rugby country.
It's all rugby country, yeah. I'd. Okay, the first thing is that I think you were saying this before, Mick, as well. It's like it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. Ideally, you'd do both. You'd beat New Zealand on Saturday, and then beat them again in 15 months' time. But obviously, for the purpose of this, you're kind of. Like, I think that in theory, like, I love the kind of just, almost just the balls about Williams thing. It's like, yeah, we'll send our seconds out to play you. And it's just like, see you later. All right, the lad's flying home.
But it's very strategic. Like, it is in effect sacrificing the third test.
Yeah,
that is a big move to make. And then, like, well, it's a big chance to make, because in 15 months' time, if you lose the quarter-final, then you're scratching your head thinking,
go back to the nothing to lose point. I think it's ludicrous, because what we have to lose is the chance of beating New Zealand in New Zealand, something that we've never done, something that nobody has done as a series since 1994, something that is such a big deal at the moment that we're talking about the job of the New Zealand coach, something that Matt Williams himself said is affecting the New Zealand stock market. Whether that's true or not.
How big is that?
No, but Matt's saying in one case that it's that big, but in the second case, like basically, in another way, almost throw it.
The World Cup dwarfs everything.
But the World Cup isn't going to be affected by what we do in this. It's like a psychological.
His argument was like was
a psychological.
He's about to say, "Let me finish." Could that be the name of the slot? Don't matter. Go on.
A psychological win over New Zealand, which, you know, in a defeat. I think the chances of us meeting New Zealand in the World Cup is the least likely of the scenarios. I think that we're more than likely going to finish second in the group, South Africa, and play France, who are going to win the group in France with New Zealand. Okay, so this whole obsession with meeting New Zealand again, I think, is a bit misplaced. And like, Ireland could go and put a second team in this test and everything could go wrong in the next 12 months and we could end up losing to Scotland and not even get out of the group. We've a really hard group, like, you know what I mean? And you know the way Scotland are. Yeah. You don't know what way they'll end up being by next October. And, you know, and we've given up this chance. I can't. I hate the rugby
People.
conversation.
Oh, sorry.
No, I like the rugby people sometimes. No, I hate the rugby conversation that everything has to boil down to this one thing every 4 years.
Rugby's in danger of ruining its sport.
Winning a series in New Zealand,
Yeah,
Joe.
They talk down everything.
Joe, before 2016, I never thought we'd ever win a match against New Zealand.
I know. But even the Six Nations now has been completely undermined. Like Eddie Jones has done his level best in the past year to completely undermine the tournament by talking about the games only through the prism of building for a World Cup. Like, one of the better things about rugby has been the fact that somehow through professionalism and however long history, that test matches in November are contested as test matches, that we don't have the scourge of friendlies, which, you know, have been so terrible that football has had to come up with a solution. So why we want to just dismiss every achievement aside from that 1 month every 4 years, I don't know. Like, why doesn't it mean something to win a Six Nations anymore? Why would it not mean a huge amount to win a series in New Zealand?
It does.
I guarantee you, if Ireland win it, well, look, when Ireland beat New Zealand in November, it's now dismissed, I would say, by huge quotient of sports fans as glorified friendly or irrelevant because they won't beat them at the World Cup, etc. And if they win the series, it will be dismissed as, well, let's see what happens at the World Cup. It's New Zealand at a low ebb, etc. As opposed to just, it was their best against Ireland's best. Both teams were trying.
Yeah, it's a moment in time. We don't necessarily think that we're a better rugby nation than New Zealand, but this team beat them, and they haven't yet.
So
Sorry.
I know we're getting ahead of ourselves. This happened last night as well. We have to be very careful.
part of what Matt Williams was arguing, right, is the fact that if you did that, and it's just a psychological thing on one hand, but on the other hand, you get to try players out within that sort of furnace that otherwise. And then if it comes to a point that Johnny Sexton isn't available for the quarter-final in 15 months' time, you have a player who's done it before. Yeah, but there's a logic to that.
I know, but why is everything sacrificed now for the World Cup? I don't remember it being this acute 15
I suppose
years ago.
professionalism, like, it's just like the tests were there before you all had like Champions Cup, before you had all these types of things. Like, you have so much rugby now that it can be dwarfed. If you have Champions Cup in whatever, May, June. Yeah. November internationals, but then the Six Nations. So of the three of them, obviously the November international seems maybe a little bit less.
But it does make this 4-year cycle drag. Like, at least in football, there's a big tournament internationally every 2 years. In this part of the world, you got the Euros at the World Cup. But like, otherwise, we're just going to be sitting here saying, well, but let's not talk about rugby until once every 4 years.
But this is what I love about the June, as they used to be, now July tests, since they've redone them. And I know they're going to wreck them again now, and they're not happening like this anymore. But one country goes to another country for 3 tests is class. Like the 2016 tour of South Africa, 2018 of Australia, and obviously was none during COVID, so we're back to 2022 now for New Zealand. They've all been amazing tours, and it's way better than the November thing where jaded Southern Hemisphere teams who have nothing to prove do come up. And it is a test match, not a friendly, but there's a little bit more leeway, I would say, especially in South Africa and Australia. Maybe not as much for the All Blacks, who don't like to lose, you know, as we know. But we've played South Africa teams that weren't worth a shite, like, you know, and then they'll come and they'll beat us by 40 points in the World Cup, like, you know what I mean? That, like, we know that. But this is the start of their season. This is what they big up, and we don't have that laissez-faire kind of attitude. We need to go and be at our best when this Northern Hemisphere teams go south. So that's a brilliant part of the calendar, I think. Personally, there's brilliant rugby going on at the moment every weekend across. Like,
and do you find yourself viewing it all towards what does this mean for the World Cup and what does that mean for the World Cup?
You can't help it. Yeah. Do you not find you can't help it because it's what all the coverage is, ours included? I don't mean to say we're not. We're
the most.
We're not above any of this.
We're the most look ahead to the World Cup merchants of any. I think.
Yeah. And I understand. Like, I mean, of course, and it is coming around the corner now. But what I'm saying to you is, like, in whatever we make a semi-final, it won't be our last semi-final that we ever make, you know. And it's like, and that's fine. We'll have broken a duck or whatever. But it's like winning a Test series in New Zealand is something we might never do again. There might never even be another one, like, you know, of a 3-test series.
But is that not just breaking a duck as well? And if there isn't another one, fine. That's kind of just circumstances. But even that,
I think it's a level of achievement that would be bigger than, say, if we'd beaten Wales in the 2011 quarter-final when we kind of blew it.
Yeah, but we're saying this is a bang average New Zealand team.
By New Zealand standards.
Yeah.
But it's not bang average team. It's still unbelievably difficult to win in New Zealand.
Is it?
Nobody has done this since '94, as a series.
Yeah, so how many
years in county?
Yeah, I mean,
England did it before. England didn't do it as a series, but they won down there.
They only played them once.
In 2002. It's a very good time to go, and build that kind of confidence in yourself ahead of a World Cup as well, you know, which obviously England did, and then went on and won the Grand Slam, which they'd bottled 3 years in a row before that, and then went on fully believing themselves to win a World Cup.
I guess maybe all the World Cup talk, maybe this does happen in like successful football countries, like obviously Republic of Ireland, it's just, can we win our next game, you know, can we qualify? Whereas maybe if you're sitting there on German television, all they're talking about for the 4 years is, oh, what does us winning by 3-1 here tell us about the World Cup?
I think it does in the Euros though, because everything else is a qualifier for that tournament. There isn't these individual... I suppose the Nations League does exist now, but you would imagine that is with the prism of how are we doing ahead of the big games. It's a different sport. Like I know, different sport is such an easy thing to say, but it is a different calendar, I suppose. You know, and
so we're not sacrificing test number 3. Is that what we're agreeing here?
You don't have to sacrifice it, but I do think it has to be forced. I do struggle with in and of itself.
So would you rest Johnny Sexton?
But when are you going to try someone else out otherwise? He's like, what is he, 37?
But try out for what though? Because this will be Johnny Sexton. If Johnny Sexton leads Ireland to winning a Test series in New Zealand, I think it's unlikely we win the World Cup next year. But it won't affect us.
I have a question.
Winning but this will be Johnny Sexton's greatest achievement as a rugby player. What would you drop him for it?
This might be his greatest achievement.
Nonsense. That's insulting.
What's his greatest achievement?
What? That's insulting.
4 European Cups.
But this is into
Grand Slams. You're just diminishing the Six Nations now.
I know. I think winning a series in New Zealand
away from home,
I think it's bigger than a Six Nations.
He didn't play in the first test.
Well, we lost it by 40 points or something.
Exactly.
So that's
like, how can it be? How could potentially one game and whatever happens in the second game be considered his greatest rugby achievement? That to me is mad.
He came in with 1-0 down, and
lads.
Hang on, what's the bigger one?
4 European Cups. A European Cup.
The club rugby isn't in the same.
Grand Slams.
I think it trumps a Grand Slam.
I think that's nonsense.
But hang on, so you beat England, you beat France,
Wales, Scotland.
I tell you, Rog won a Grand Slam, Jack Kyle won a Grand Slam. None of them have done this.
Do you know, like, okay, you beat Scotland, you beat Italy, you get a win over Wales, England and France, good wins.
Yeah.
Winning 2 on the bounce against New Zealand in New Zealand. Beats beating England.
I think you're taking out the no, I don't think so, because I don't think, first of all, as a start, I don't think I don't know this, but the circumstances of them beating us won't mean the same to them as us beating them. It's circumstantial, but beating Ireland at home doesn't. Winning the series wouldn't have made a difference.
Handily, fair enough.
Winning the series because Ireland's nothing to them.
Oh, sorry, for them it's an afterthought.
Yeah,
but not. Since,
I know if they lose the circumstances. Yeah, it does.
They are not allowed losing.
Not since Ireland started beating them. Like, they would have now viewed Ireland as very genuine opponents, and now it's 1-1. So now it's a big deal.
I think that's, I couldn't believe that it would be the best thing.
Well, you see, he's played brilliantly. Like O'Gara even said on Sunday on the show that he played as well on Saturday as he's ever seen Sexton play. So he's not like, he's pitched up and done it with the lines, and now he's pitching up and he's leading Ireland to a series win. Yeah. But that would be his greatest hour, his finest hour.
I would, I don't know. I don't think, it's not this he's hanging around for.
But you can't compare, like, beating Ulster in 2012, like, by 1 million points. Like, obviously Northampton was amazing, but Northampton versus New Zealand, like, come on.
But, like, the drop against France, that
might be his moment.
The greatest moment, that was.
That's greatest achievement.
But beating France is not a
trophy. Like, what else are you there for? Like, come on.
There's bound to be a trophy.
I was going to say, surely there's a Millennium, Quidditch Cup or something like that.
I find that hard to believe.
Do you not think so?
I can't.
I honestly think this is like one of his crowning moments in his CV. Captaining and also bossing on the pitch Ireland to a series win in New Zealand. Come on. What do you want from the man?
I have a horrible feeling a lot of this stuff is going to be played back to us next week. We are assuming Ireland are going to beat New Zealand. We've done it once.
When they lose by inclusion.
They had a red card in the middle of the first half.
Let's just say for the record, New Zealand are favourites. New Zealand are favourites. If there was a gun to our heads, we would tip New Zealand to win. Let's put that on the record so we can't be destroyed in a few days' time.
I'm open to your kind of understanding. I'm shocked by that. I'm surprised that would be.
I've hardened in my view. I wasn't sure a few days ago, and I've been thinking about it.
About it being Sexton's biggest achievement. I think so, without a doubt. I think if you asked, and it's funny, it's a pity Brian isn't on after us instead of before us, but I think if you asked that question, I think they'd be hard pressed. Like, winning a World Cup is the only thing bigger than this.
He was World Player of the Year. That was obviously an amazing accolade as well. But I think it's.
So what's like, and not to compare apples and oranges, but for great players that hadn't done it, what would be Brian O'Driscoll's greatest achievement then? 09 Grand Slam.
See that, and that was so epic at the time, potentially, yeah. And he was phenomenal.
But so
in
beating,
that
if
Six
they'd beaten the
Nations.
All Blacks, say in 2012, that would have surpassed that. Like I could,
that
well,
world
maybe that
champion All Black
but
team.
like,
Yeah.
This isn't a world champion All Black team, you know.
No, that's true. There is a slight.
This is a kind of a dip.
Yeah, there
you
is
know.
a dip. There is a dip. There is a dip. Yeah.
I don't know if that. I don't know. Like,
But
it's
Arthur,
interesting.
by the same token, when Ireland did the Grand Slam on St Paddy's Day against England in 2018, that English team were at an incredibly low ebb.
Yeah.
That was a walk in the park. Like, I mean, we almost won the Grand Slam in Paris, the first game of that tournament.
Yeah,
like, you know.
yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Let's move on for a moment then. The other interesting sporting event we're on the cusp of is St Andrews, the home of golf. I don't know if you've heard it said this week, but it's the home of golf. They've gone deep on nostalgia. How excited are you two for this, out of interest?
Do you know what? I like the way it looks, but I don't like. I prefer my golf majors to be on American time. I prefer watching 11, 12 o'clock at night.
It's interesting.
with you on
That is interesting. I never
prefer
thought of it that way.
I don't
Yeah,
like
yeah.
when it's over. I like the way Lowry is the one that stands out, but just that it doesn't appeal
no,
to
I'm
me
with
as
you.
much.
Prime time.
Yeah, I want that. I want
Totally
that feel
agree.
of it.
Late nights, that's what you want.
Like
Yeah.
the championship holes are going to be played up against the All Ireland final on Sunday.
No.
Bloody All Ireland, bloody GA calendar. Can we change it?
Nothing good about this
How
calendar.
did I not think of that? That's ridiculous. I didn't even cop that. That's madness.
And there's an awful lot of crossover in
What if it's
people who
Lowry?
like hurling and like
Lowry
golf, you know?
or McElroy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all compressed
grief.
in, all the sport this year.
That's madness.
But I love the Open. Like, I mean, I still think it holds this kind of incredible sort of nostalgia to me of like getting up on a summer's morning and watching BBC from 8 o'clock in the morning, wondering will Barry Lane hold on to his early lead at 2 under. You know, as like Peter Alice talks to me about like random golf clubs in Northern England.
Yeah.
You know,
North Berwick, lovely spot
yeah.
this time of year.
they make a lovely cup of tea and a little bun.
Yeah.
You know, but like, you know, those days are gone. But, you know, Sky, in fairness, do a great job of kind of continuing that, like the tone of golf coverage, I would say, you know?
Yeah.
I was listening to, I was just like, in the background, had the TV on the like they were doing like the Tuesday, you know, lads just hitting practice tee. I don't know why it was live coverage of it, but then a commentary team out for it, you know?
It's been 3 days non-stop.
I wasn't watching it,
Yeah.
but in the background I just felt like the golf was on.
Yeah.
The Open is on and we're in St Andrews and it was just lovely, like, yeah.
And they've made a big play this week of history and tradition, and I'm sure there's they would have done it anyway, but it's taken on an extra resonance in the face of the Live Golf thread as it's been discussed. So Greg Norman wasn't invited. He was the only champion not invited
That's
to the
unbelievable.
Champions Dinner.
I can't believe they can't believe they weren't just like, we're above that. I'm not saying they should have been. In some ways, I think it's a great move.
Yeah.
But I just can't believe they didn't just say every champion's invited.
I was
you
surprised
know.
as well. Woods and McElroy came out and they were very supportive of the move. They said the focus should be on the 150th Open. You see, I'd say when the RNA were discussing this amongst themselves, they said, we just can't trust Norman. Like, we can't trust this man to not show up and say, this is not a week to discuss Live Golf. This is to celebrate the fact that Jack Nicklaus is here for the first time in 17 years and Watson's here and all the greats are here and we're having this dinner and like homage to this amazing week. Like, Norman would have shown up in a Live Golf hat and t-shirt and done every interview he could right in front of the clubhouse, and every headline would have been Norman this, Norman that, Norman attacks this. So I think they said we can't trust him. It'll overshadow the whole week. Let's not do it. The other interesting thing is that Phil Mickelson declined the invitation to the Champions Dinner, and it shows how far he's just blown himself out of really the centre point almost of the golfing universe. Like Mickelson, it's hard to say anything with him is genuine now, but I would have thought he had a genuine appreciation for history and he would show up at the ceremonial tee starts at Augusta, even if his tee time was much later in the day. So I thought he got it. Now, it's hard to know everything with him as an act in some respects, but for him not to show up to what could be Jack Nicklaus's last ever Open Champions Dinner, for instance, is kind of extraordinary, really. And you couldn't have imagined it even just
Do you think it's
6 months ago.
embarrassment? Is it embarrassment? Or
You know what it is?
Awkwardness, maybe.
maybe?
Yeah, although I'd say Phil Mickelson could get over awkwardness.
They can
I
barrel
hope
through it.
I think I'll go in there. They'll love me. I hope it's not a misguided alignment to my friend Greg. If you're not going to invite Greg, I'm not going to go. Like, I'm sure those two are winding each other up no end on the phone, you know. And did you hear they said this and that? You know, I can imagine them like whipping up a storm at all times.
God, it's mad that it is like full-on civil war at this stage. Because I thought last week, he's like, God, Rory was like the last man standing in terms of like the outright opposition. And he, you know, softened is probably...
He did?
Yeah, he did soften. I suppose, you know, I hold that word of him calling people, you know... I don't know. I just think that he still left some wiggle room that I don't think he's kind of gone back on his previous words, you know, but... at the same time, he absolutely softened. So you're thinking, maybe this is over now. You know, we talked to Pádraig Harrington, you know, on the show here, and he talked about like this is an inevitability at this stage. There's no stopping it now. You're like, okay, right, maybe it's just time to move on in a certain way into a new aspect of the story. But then Tiger comes out against it, and you're saying all these things about how kind of the Open are treating it, and it does feel like it's still on open warfare, like, you know.
Yeah. The other interesting talking point this week is whether this could be a humiliation of sorts for the grand old course. Such as technology now, there was a fear that there could be incredibly low scores. So many of these players can now drive greens. They can't make the place any bigger. You know, even a number of the tee boxes aren't even on the course anymore. They're like across the road in a different field, which is...
So they can't, there's just no way anymore, is there?
Yeah. For so many of the holes, no. I mean...
Could they make it, could they like knock it down to like a par 68 or something like that?
Yeah, maybe. Like... There's obviously the potential that if it's calm, they may just have to use what the pros would regard as like tricked up pins, putting on a slope that's just stupid, in effect. You know, putting the pins here where all I can do is same shot, and that's bad because that'll be bad golf. It'll be lads hitting the same shot to the same spot, cozying up a putt with no chance of a birdie and just tapping in for par, and that's not great golf either. So like Peter Lowry was in the Golf Pod, Golf Weekly today, and he definitely thinks there could be like a score that's so low this week if the wind doesn't blow, like wind being the big defence of any links course. He thinks there could be a score whereby they might just almost in effect retire St Andrews from the Open. Now
that'd be horrible.
If that doesn't prompt some kind of redress on how far the ball is going, nothing will.
How low could it go?
Talking 25 under, like a bad PGA course.
It's just kind of a grim fascination with that.
Tiger got to 19 under.
How far ahead of everybody else? So I'd always worry about like if it's a shootout of guys over 20 under.
I think you could have a glut of guys threatening 60.
Right.
Really?
Yeah.
On a calm Thursday.
Yeah. Like Mickelson a couple of years ago at Troon almost broke 63, like the record which has stood forever, and couldn't do it. You know, he just missed a putt at the end, and he said, I didn't believe in golfing gods, I do now. Like this threshold has been there. But yeah, it's potentially under threat. Now I think there's certainly a bit of a breeze today, but then I heard Fowler talking on the endless coverage on Sky, and he was remarking that on the 17th, the road hole, which is like one of the toughest holes in golf, that a young South African up-and-comer was within 26 yards of the green, and this is like sacrilege almost. They can't contemplate the course being taken apart by bombers in that way. The hope would be, like, say, take a Bryson or something, and if you know, he goes super aggressive and tries to drive every hole, that there's a big number lurking somewhere. You know, if you're going to do that, when you miss, you're going to miss big. So you could be into a gorse bush, and you know you.
Yeah, is there enough of that stuff in St Andrews though? That's what There's the pop bunkers that you could be screwed into as well if you take them on. But
okay. Law numbers though is if enough pros look at it and say my best bet here is to go super aggressive and hope it's my week. The law of averages says that one of that pack could go super low, and they just get the lucky bounces and they're super aggressive, and so the plodding, cerebral Tiger Woods picking his way through the course as God intended will suddenly not be able to keep pace with somebody who's going incredibly aggressive. And I guess you don't want to get to a point, and Peter mentioned this, where like if they're all just taking on these Hail Mary shots because distance allows them to now, where it becomes a touch luck, as in nobody, when you're hitting the ball 330 yards through, you know, warm weather, you can't play for a bounce in the distance. I'm going to play it off that slope. There's a degree of I'm firing it that far, and hopefully my one kicks right and his one kicks left and I have the birdie putt. And so you don't want the course to either, one, be redundant, like I said, because of low scores, but you don't want it either, two, to start producing a quirky winner. Links can sometimes, Todd Hamilton and such, but like the roll of honours list at St Andrews is exemplary. It's like a legend all the way through, effectively. So you don't want it to be so quirky that we're getting weird winners that no one's heard of either. So it's an interesting week at St Andrews for all those reasons, aside from all the obvious, you know.
Can I just have one spanner in the works?
Yeah.
Is there any chance that St Andrews, as amazing as it is, and I look forward to the St Andrews Open because of what I think it's going to be, but I'm trying to remember the truth now. Is there any chance that St Andrews is a bit of a boring course in terms of what the types of the tour? It's all a bit samey.
Big time.
It's all, the greens are huge. Nobody ever misses a green, you know. And I find the golf isn't as good to watch as it is in some of the other courses.
I think that's a really fair observation. Like and I think they've turned it up to 11 this week.
Okay.
There's a degree of, it's the most cerebral test in golf. There's, you know, an anecdote. I was listening to a podcast this week where like some billionaire friends of Woods, I suspect he doesn't have anyone friendly who's not.
Who isn't, but yeah, he's
7-0 beside
almost getting that B, yeah, at the very least, yeah.
We're over and they played it and they came back and they said, you know, the history is wonderful and like the town is gorgeous and that square with 1 and 18 and the buildings and the hotel, I mean, yes, amazing, what a theatre. But the golf course, you know, it was okay. And Woods' alleged reply was, "You're not good enough to understand." so
I like this new feisty defending golf tiger.
But to your point, I think TV, and I'm hopeful, because this is a bit nerdy, I watched some of the 05 final round back last night just to remember Woods in his prime.
As you do.
It's on YouTube. I got into it. I was watching it.
You talk like Tiger Woods, like I don't think I've ever heard people talk about a sports person. Maybe Michael Jordan or something like that.
Blows Jordan out of the water. Yeah. We can have a debate.
No, I'm not. I'm saying the way people talk about Michael Jordan.
He is that, and more.
The way I talk about like PJ O'Connell.
And do you know what it is though? If you were to ask anyone, can you remember all at Augusta? I can name holes. You remember them?
Yeah.
At St Andrews, aside from 17, 1 and 18, it's like I can't even see the fairway. He's just hitting it over
postage stamp.
Some gorsh. No.
That's Troon, is it?
Yeah.
Well, it's definitely not St Andrews anyway.
Definitely not St Andrews.
Damn it.
I think TV in 05, they still had like a blimp as opposed to drones. Like, it's amazing how much it's changed. I'm hoping this is the first time that TV really bring it to life. And they're like, here's the tee box. This is the line he's thinking of. If he doesn't hit that exact line, these bunkers up here are going to vacuum that ball in and he's screwed.
Yeah.
So even though this looks wide open, he's got 10 yards to aim at here and drawing lines and, you know, making it all very obvious to people. Because I agree with you. It does blend, as a viewer, it does blend into one. Anyone I've talked to who has played it does say it's an extraordinary experience. And maybe you have to kind of play it to appreciate the minutiae.
I'll never know, Joe.
Yeah, fair enough.
Unfortunately.
Are we pretty much done?
Sure, we might be.
Any other final thoughts anyone wants to offer?
No, nothing at all.
We had a few things jotted down. We were going to discuss the coverage of Manchester United 4, Liverpool 0. Just suffice to say,
the fact that there was coverage and that we know the score is a problem for me. But
well, I came to it late and I thought, well, maybe it's not insignificant. You know, Ten Hag after a good start, and then I saw Jurgen Klopp played 30 players in the game.
Yeah,
that never happened before in a friendly.
30 players.
I remember Sven-Goran Eriksson was like abused for ending friendlies sometime around 2004 because he made 8 substitutions once. But 30 is quite something. No. Gents, we are out of time. Mick McCarthy, thank you very much.
Thanks, Joe.
Arthur O'D, thank you very much.
Best of luck, Johnny Sexton.